But I want to welcome all of you and thank you all for coming to this very special program. And our guest speaker, as he said, is a local resident, Dr. Bill Patzert, and he's a climatologist and an oceanographer working out of JPL. And I can't believe you and Albert Metzger aren't tight buds. I didn't know there were 5,000 people there. So no wonder you don't know each other. And Dr. Patzert is kind of the rock star of the climate world. The media always goes to him for information and comments on current conditions. And if I listed all of his credentials, we'd have to postpone the meeting because they're extensive. Today he's going to talk about what's going on with California's weather and water, El Nino 2010, a drought buster. And this is extremely timely considering Mr. Inman's program last week. And would you all please welcome Dr. Bill Patzert.
Well, thank you very much, and it's really a pleasure to be here. You know, I've loved living in Sierra Madre. It's a great little city, and you know, it's probably the best place I've ever lived, and the longest I've ever lived in one place. But let's talk a little bit about what's going on with California's weather. You know, here weather is water, and last winter we had an event. We had am I in your way here? We had a little El Nino, and I want to emphasize a little El Nino. But as we look across Southern California, or really across all of California, now Bruce, you know, I learned a lot about water here just having lunch. All our water here in Sierra Madre comes locally. But for the rest of California, we have the greatest water-moving machine in the United States, perhaps in the world. So most of Southern California imports 70% of their water. That's either from the Colorado or from the Bay Delta, up where the Sacramento pours into San Francisco Bay, down through the great aqueducts, either coming from the Colorado or down to the San Joaquin Valley. But it's been dry. And so the great reservoirs, and that's underground, groundwater reservoirs, and above ground reservoirs are pretty low right now. And so sometimes you have more water than you need. But right now, we're actually running in California on reserves. And so I want you to appreciate how fortunate you are here in Sierra Madre. Now, of course, not everybody appreciates water and droughts. And you know, a lot of people said, oh, we just had an El Nino. What's the problem? Where's the drought? Everybody's full up with water. But it turns out to be not the case. But before I get into it, you know, Sierra Madre actually has a interesting history of meteorology. Modern records of rainfall started in the West in about 1887. And it turns out that there's a record that was begun in Upper Lima by the Carter family. Mrs. Carter, actually, and she started collecting rainfall and temperature records that go back, actually get them off the web, 1887. And then they trailed off in the 80s and the 90s. People didn't pick it up. But our average rainfall here is about 24 inches a year, roughly. We get big rain in January, February, March, and December, and then we have the long, dry summer. Now, the average rainfall downtown is about 15 inches. So here are the foothills, and I don't know if you remember about 5 years ago, we had an extremely wet winter, really wet. It just wouldn't stop raining. And at my house over on Mariposa, that winter I actually measured 74 inches of rain. Remember that one, Bruce? That was sweet, huh? Yeah. But this is an interesting record, actually. Let me just give you a little history here. I was trying to find out rainfall records in Sierra Madre, and Bruce referred me to the librarian over at the library here that she dug out of the archives. It turns out that the Carters started collecting rainfall. And of course, back then it was all avocado, lemon, and orange. And so it was all farming here back in the 1800s. And so farmers are always interested in the weather and the rainfall. And then one of the Carter ladies married some guy named Colonel Hennessy. All right? And he was an interesting guy. Turns out that he was the head of the National Weather Service in the early days in downtown Los Angeles. He also was, he rode with Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders and he participated in a number of polar expeditions. And so there's an interesting history of meteorology here at Sierra Madre, the old colonel. Now, let's look at rainfall here for the last 5 or 6 years. 2004, 2005. Now we count the rainfall from July 1st to June 30th. So we're about to come to the end of the rain year here. Now, we had 37 inches 2004, 2005. That was an interesting year. That was the year that I measured 74 inches in Sierra Madre. But that was followed by 4 below normal years. Average is 15 inches. And this year we're going to end up with a little above 16 inches, which I wouldn't call that a big rainfall year. I would call that an average rainfall year. And so it wasn't that big here in Southern California this past winter. So, but the important thing to remember is the last 4 years have been way below normal. Actually, they've been only about 60% of normal. And that's not just here in Sierra Madre. That's all of Southern California and most of the state. And so it's been dry, and that's one of the reasons many places in Southern California are rationing water. And of course, in the interim, Sierra Madre has remained fairly stable. But in 1950, there were only 4 million people in Southern California, between Santa Barbara and Tijuana. Anybody know how many there are now? Right, there's 20 million now. And so the growth has done this. And as I'll show you, supply has done that. So you don't need a PhD to figure that one out, where the demand goes up and the supply goes down. Okay, so a little story we're always interested here in Southern California is Show Me the Water. Now, story I'm going to tell you is most of your water, of course you all know, it comes out of evaporation over the Pacific. And all our weather mostly comes in from the Pacific. And so I always say when the Pacific speaks, you better listen. And last fall, there was a lot of talk about El Nino. It was going to bail us out. But the really big news locally here in the last couple of years has been not rainfall, but fire. All right? And we've had some big fires here. And of course, that also impacts our local water supply. The station fire up above JPL in La Cañada was 250 square miles. It's the biggest Southern California wildfire in recorded history. And of course, we have a little fire up here too, which people will still feel for the next 2 to 3 years because the vegetation takes at least 5 or 6 years to reestablish itself and stabilize the hillsides. So we're not done with that.